Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Week That Was. This is Saeed Khan, broadcasting.
And I've already made the first fatal error of the show, but go ahead.
Broadcasting from the lovely and now snow-fallen Detroit. And yes, I believe some of you who are the diehard fans and tuners in notice that we have a different soundtrack this morning.
Sorry. I think I played the wrong. I thought the countdown would then lead into the themes, the opening theme. And if anybody wants me to play that, I can. But I think the horses left the barn. No, the horses left the barn.
That was actually kind of refreshing to hear something else. It wasn't quite a funeral dirge. It wasn't craft work, but it was definitely different. So thank you for going ahead and doing that. And you're probably wondering, why was the music different and why could this have possibly happened? Well, the usual intrepid person who has his fingers on. Actually, I didn't realize that Lengel was also a DJ. Allan Lengel, the co-founder of Deadline Detroit, is currently in Israel, and at this very moment, and I hope, Allan, you are actually listening in on a device, enjoying Shabbat dinner with his nephew. So, Allan, hope you're doing well, and we will see you very soon when you return from that side of the world. But we have a full lineup here tonight, or this morning. We have attorney Joel Sklar.
Hello.
And in true Noah's Ark fashion, we're in pairs today. We've got attorney Steve Fishman.
Good morning, all.
We've got public relations specialist David Rudolph.
Good morning.
And in absentia, we have public relations specialist Greg Bowens, who will join us soon.
Maybe.
And I guess, Nancy, you and I are then the odd people out. We have veteran journalist Nancy Derringer, also this week's DJ, and I think we're ready to go. So I thought we would change the order of some of the items that I had sent to you to talk about. There was, of course, quite a prolific, I should say, speech given today or this week. It wasn't on Monday evening. We can get to that one later. This one actually involved 15 minutes on Saturday Night Live with Dave Chappelle, going ahead and opening the show with a monologue regarding Kanye West, Kyrie Irving, and the topic of anti-Semitism. For those of you who haven't seen it, I'm sure it's probably available on some social media sites. It's
on YouTube.
Trending,
you can find it. Yeah,
it's trending very heavily. And the responses to it have certainly been mixed, and they have certainly been vibrant, all the way from articles saying that he was echoing anti-Semitism, perhaps even normalizing it, all the way to some saying that it was, in fact, providing greater context for it, and everything in between. So what was Dave doing, and was this anti-Semitism?
You want to hear from the Jews? Is that what you're asking?
Actually, I'm not going to use the words "the" and "Jews" in the
same
sentence.
That's a dangerous thing to do. They said that too.
Yeah.
You want to go, Joel, or you want me to go?
Go ahead. You go.
I watched the whole thing yesterday. Once you sent me the lineup, I think Chappelle is a really bright guy. I didn't find it to be anywhere near anti-Semitic. The closest thing to it was when he kind of suggested that the Jews run Hollywood or run, that kind of stuff. We've only been hearing that for as long as there's been Hollywood. As I said the last time I was on the show, those of us who are Jewish, there's nothing unusual at all about what people are saying. The difference is it's all broadcast all over the place because of social media and the things of that nature. I mean, I'm 73 years old, and when I was 3, it wasn't like I didn't know about this kind of stuff. I didn't think what he said was bad. I thought he was, like many times good comedians are doing, he's skirting the line. But as a Jew, I found a lot of it to be humorous. I really did. And I don't think he was vouching for either Kanye or Kyrie. I got really the feeling that what he was saying was both of them are idiots, particularly Kanye. He did say you should keep your mouth shut. I suppose if you want to interpret that as saying that means Jews run everything. But I didn't interpret it that way. I interpret it as if you're going to make certain statements that are going to cost you money, which is basically what he was talking about, you ought to think twice before you do it. Kyrie Irving's in a different, I think I said before, by the way, and then I turn it over to Joel. I didn't agree with the suspension of Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving's been first thing, he's a ridiculously great player. There's no doubt about it. But he's been a fool since he joined the Flat Earth Society. I mean, it's not like this is something new. And I did not agree with Adam Silver suspending him. I just, and then making him do this and making him do that. I just don't go for that kind of stuff. But I think a lot of that is because I understand, I think Joel understands, that there's a ton of people that harbor anti-Semitic thoughts. That doesn't mean they go running around like Nazis and asking to toss us in the gas chambers again. But a lot of people believe a lot of foolishness about the Jews. And you just can't really avoid that. I grew up with guys who they thought all kinds of crazy stuff until they got to know a lot of us. And that's what I think was going on here. Yeah. My summary is I didn't find it to be offensive. I do think Dave Chappelle's a really bright guy. And I kind of liked the way he handled it. He walked up to the line and he had a lot of humor in there too. So I was not offended, but I'm not a member of AIPAC or, there's a lot of Jews that are offended anytime anybody says anything about anything. And that's not me.
Correct. Okay. No, I'm with you. I didn't find it anti-Semitic. I see Dave Chappelle as an artist who is to provoke thought. Anti-Semitism is an issue that should be explored. People have different views on the role of Jewish people in society, I suppose, and the perceived control or lack thereof. It's kind of nuts. I mean, I just know for me, I haven't been to an Elders of Zion meeting in some time. So I find it very hard to believe there's a cabal of Jews doing anything. I've been with a lot of Jewish people who were pretty incompetent, more or less, and outside of many things. But I found it
by the way, how was the food the last time you were at one?
Well, the food. George Soros is a funny guy. He brings a lot of. He insists on lean corned beef. If it's not lean, George goes nuts. So, and the coleslaw that he brings is ridiculous to die for. So, in any event, I thought it was provocative. I think those, again, it's always a sensitive thing when you're Jewish, like anybody else, when someone's talking about your culture or who you are perceived to be. And it's dangerous to dehumanize anybody. But I didn't think David Chappelle, I don't think he's an anti-Semite. I don't think he was anti-Semitic. I thought he was provocative, which is what he's supposed to be. And I appreciate that. I think the conversation is important to have. It demystifies things. If we don't speak about things, they become greater than they are. Okay. So I think the conversations are going to have. I read what Dave Stewart, or not Dave. What's
Jon Stewart?
Jon Stewart, forgive me. And he was kind of like, hey, it invites a conversation, and let's have it. Let's demystify some of these tropes, and let's have a conversation. I think once you get to know everybody, I think people kind of get along.
Yeah. One other thing, I think I've said it on this show before. The biggest problem, in my view, with everything, whether it's race, ethnicity, religion, is that it's ignorance. People don't know people of a different race or a different. If we all are in the same area and everybody's sitting around and you meet the people's family and you talk to people and you realize most of us are just trying to do the same thing, make a living, raise your children, et cetera, and so forth. It's a lot more difficult to be anti-Semitic or racist or anti-Arabs or whatever it is. It's a lot more difficult to do it when people know people. And right. I think that's always been my position since I was a kid. I've heard things that people say. I can't even tell you the things I heard when we used to play baseball up at Gladwin and Standish and those kinds of places, but they'd never seen or heard a Jew in life. But once you get to know people, that's how we break down those kinds of barriers. Joel's saying the same thing.
Yeah.
All right, okay. David.
Yeah, you know what? Steve just said something that was just on my mind is that I think ignorance can be a very big and dangerous part of this. As there's so many aspects, and I think there are people who don't understand new rounds of folks that are coming into this sort of dialogue, don't understand, some of the issues at hand. I watched the SNL skit and I thought it was brilliant. I've always seen David as he does poke the bear. He stepped up to the line, but I also see him as a thought leader, and so. I've watched many of his stand-up, and if you listen through him, I think there's a much deeper message that he is conveying. That often you get these either one-side camps at all. So I don't think it was anti-Semitic at all. There's a bit of a problematic. I think again, it's sort of watch what you say, and how you said it. I think it's. when he talked about the issue related to Hollywood, this is what we call kind of in the Black community, this is like family business. Like there's some things that actually, that may be perceived as true or felt a certain way, whether or not it's fact or not. But there's just some things that, that you just don't say. And I know in my own household, and I had this conversation with Allan actually yesterday, and I said, I've heard a lot of things coming in the pulpit, in particular in Black church, and as a Christian, and I can sum it up to say is that it often came down to because being Christian and the connection between our faith leads us to Jesus and him being Jewish, and in fact there is a sort of a relationship that African Americans have had. And the bottom line is, I've heard is, you don't mess with Jewish folks. And that is something that I think is another touch point in my community in terms of, and I think there's new folks that are coming into this dialogue, especially with Kanye and Kyrie. It's interesting to look at who is saying what, the old school versus new school folks that are out there, and where they're lining up on how they're perceiving some of these messages, and either co-signing or not. And so I find it very curious, in that aspect. But I will say that I don't think that there was a line crossed. I think Dave does exactly what he does, which is to really hold up a mirror. And he's really suggesting there needs to be a real conversation openly. There needs to be
right, and he's right,
David. That's exactly right. And I wouldn't bore you with stories. I could tell you stories where people said things they didn't even realize were anti-Semitic. And my response has always been, look, what you just said, such and such. Here, let's sit down here for a second. Well, in 10 minutes, I'll be able to clear this thing up for you. All Jews are rich. All Jews are brilliant. All Jews are great students. They didn't grow up in my street on Roselawn if they thought they were all brilliant or rich, because nobody was rich, and some of them had a 1.7 at Mumford. But I mean, it's kind of it's conversation and relating.
Steve, Fish, you don't need to be that candid. We don't care about your GPA. It's all right. It's all right, man. You've come a long way. Well, Nancy,
can I say something? Well, I just want to say what Kanye West said was absolutely anti-Semitic. He said, "I'm going to go." Actually, he said, "I'm going to go DEFCON 3 on the Jewish people." Right? What Chappelle was talking about was essentially there are a lot of Jews in showbiz, which is true, and pointing that out seems about as controversial to me as pointing out that there are a lot of gay men in hairdressing or in fashion design. I mean, there are certain types of people who flock to certain businesses, and you can probably find the roots of this in Hollywood with kind of vaudeville, and which had a lot of Jewish performers, and the famous humor that we're always hearing about, the Jewish sense of humor, and it just translated well into showbiz. And then once there are some people in showbiz, they bring people they know into showbiz, and before you know it, you've got a situation like gay men in hairdressing or fashion design, or any other ethnic group that tends to dominate a particular economic sphere. So that to me is just an extreme. I mean, Chappelle is so good at this stuff. I mean, he is so good. He manages to do these incredibly intricate stand-ups that sound like they just came off the top of his head. He's silky. It's like watching a great athlete just do what they do best, secretariat, whatever. But, it's just what he said didn't strike me as a terrible thing. I mean, it's what Larry David's comedy is based on, his all of his shows are essentially based on the fact that he's a Jew in showbiz, and that's okay. So I don't know. He's, one of our readers is just popping into, or listeners, viewers is popping in to say, are we forgetting that he's mentally ill? He's living on a different plane than many of us. And she's absolutely right. I mean, a lot of people who struggle with mental illness tend to get into conspiracy theories. A friend of mine once observed, he said, all the crazy people I know who have gone crazy, go crazy in one of three areas, sex, religion, or aliens. And, you know, he's chosen apparently, you know, religion. So
was this Tom Cruise? Because I think they touch on all three over there.
Yeah,
well, you know,
exactly.
I remember a few years ago reading the book by Neil Gabler, An Empire of Their Own.
Of Their Own, right. That was a great book.
And it dealt with the Jewish founding of Hollywood studios. And I remember just really being struck by how a lot of the main studios were not only founded or established by members of the Jewish community, but that they were all from like within, I think, like a 50-mile radius of Minsk, Belarus.
Wow.
I mean, I'm like, that's just, you
Right.
know, I mean, which of course, going back to Seinfeld, you know, Rochelle, you know, she went
Been
from
a long
Luhansk
journey
to
from
Minsk, Rochelle. So anyway, and by the way, David, you know, you said, you know, growing up that you were told, you know, you don't mess with Jews, members of the Jewish community. Well, I grew up saying you don't tug on Superman's cape, you don't spit in the wind, you don't pull the mask off the Lone Ranger, and you don't mess around with Jim. But you know, we clearly grew up on different sides of the track. I was having a conversation with somebody, Fish, yesterday, and they were saying that they went to Southfield High, and when they used to play Fordson back in the day, this is before Fordson became much more of an Arab concentrated high school. They would take the court, and the cheerleaders would start with "Give me a K, give me an I." I won't go ahead and fill up the rest, but it rhymes with bike.
That's
And
anti-Semitism.
No, man.
Bikes?
Yeah, right.
I didn't realize you were against biped transportation there, Nancy. But yeah, I mean, it's I think what we're talking about here then is also a term that now is being used quite a bit, and that's the notion of casual anti-Semitism. And I think that's where the line then becomes a little bit more murky. Do you see, I mean, where that line can be drawn?
Me? You're talking to me?
Or anybody? I'm not just pointing at our Jewish brethren on the show.
Let me add something to that, and also again back to that point of ignorance that Steve sort of brought up. And also, growing up in my household, I also learned, there were like 7 words that you don't say, and we're all familiar with the N word, the K word. There was a C word. There was a number of them that and I don't think that that was just good old home training that I believe that I got. That there are some series of sets of offensive things that you can say. We call them the fighting words. If you say it, you better buckle up, because you're going to get ready to, tussle with somebody. But I think I'm reflecting back on something that I think that, because I want to point to how do you address sort of these things. And part of it is I went to two private schools in my I'm a Detroit Waldorf kid, and I went to Lutheran High School West for high school. Didn't show up to a public school until I got to MSU. In those 2 schools, we had world religion, and I had and I enjoyed learning, all the major religions and faiths and cultures, around the world. And I think one of the things that gave me is that it gave me an understanding and an appreciation of culture and religion. And so with that, I think right now, this is not a discussion related to education, but it ought to be, because it just seems like in order to combat ignorance and the kind of things that we hear and see, is that, again, the proverbial, we all can't get to sit down maybe at a table with one another and break down those walls. But if we educational wise, have an understanding and experience where our differences lie and our similarities lie, again, that's sort of like if we were all able to sit down with each other, we understand each other, that we are just, we're people trying to make it in our own world. And that's the thing, is that we don't have that anymore. We've in our culture, we've gotten, hey, we haven't had tough enough time with critical race theory. But the reality is that so much is being taken out. And, and I think even in the educational process is that it was supposed to be turning out, in education, informed adults. But I think it's not. And and we have another breeding ground because we've just taken so much out, and we got kids who are coming into adulthood who haven't studied any of this, have no sense, and immediately get parked into something that's can be very, very sinister that's brewing in households.
Correct. That sounds inviting for whatever reasons. You know.
You have these
Go ahead.
You have these statistics. I'm sorry that I mean the percentage of young people who never heard of the Holocaust. You have a percentage of people who don't know about the connection of the Civil War with slavery. It's shocking. I mean, you know, back in the day, we were just comfortable with the idea that Americans couldn't find another country on a map. But now we're looking at something that's far more deep and far more problematic. Nancy, I think you have a clip for us.
I have 2 clips for us. We'll see how the first one goes. I'm sorry that I have not had a chance to pre-watch them, but Lengel put them in, so let's give it a go.
Don't get me wrong. You know, when people I admire, whose music I like, or things like that, come out and say, "How many of you are in showbiz?" You know, here's the deal. We have our own tropes, like a white person's success is because of privilege. A minority's success is empowerment. A Jew's success, that's a conspiracy. You feel that. I feel that. But I have to be able to express that to people. If I can't say that's bull and explain why, then where do we go? And if we all just shut it down, then we retreat to our little corners of misinformation and it metastasizes.
True.
That's precisely what I've been talking about every time we have this discussion. What David's saying is completely true, and it doesn't have to necessarily go only with the Jews are misunderstood. I can't tell you guys, you know, when I was at Mumford, and especially playing basketball, I'm the only white. I can't tell you the things I heard white people say about black people that were so completely full of shit. And I'd look at them and say, really? How many brothers you play with? None. How many live on your street? None. I said, and yet you seem to know so much about black folk. And then they'd look and I'd say, you guys, you don't have a clue. And it'd be about food. It'd be about athleticism. For instance, David, I know you know this one. All black guys are great athletes. Didn't you guys know that? And everyone can dance. And everybody can sing. Right. Even though I know some of the most tone-deaf brothers and sisters in my career, and I know guys who couldn't hit the ocean from the bridge of the ship. The basket. So it's all the same stuff. The thing that we need, the notion that there are kids growing up that never heard of the Holocaust and don't know that this country was founded on slavery, that to me is unbelievable. And why would you possibly want it to continue like that? It's not a matter of being a Jew or being black. It's just a matter of being knowledgeable about the history of the country and history of the world. So the people at fault are the adults that are not allowing these kids to do it. The people, critical race theory, whatever the hell that's supposed to mean. You can't teach that slave ships came here. You can't talk about the fact that the Nazis murdered 6 million Jews. That's nuts. And it'd be insane if it was about the Poles or the Italians or anybody else.
So is there something about the American narrative that we as a society feel the need to sanitize?
Yeah.
Yes.
We do that all the time. I mean, we do that all the time. Americans have a difficult time of actual reflection. You know, I mean, just look, even in recent history, look at January 6th. I mean, we have a hard time reconciling ourselves with what we profess to believe in. And that's been true in race. It's you know, essentially what we are is a human being. We're one organism. And denial is a huge defense mechanism to every organism. And the United States has its own sense of denialism, and it's terrible. And again, the lack of education on the Civil War. I mean, you know, we're bound to repeat the things, right, historically that we don't learn from. And it's tragic. I'm 63 to see, my God, the Holocaust isn't that far ago, you know, long ago. It's not that deep in history, and yet it's forgotten.
It's not forgotten. We're on the verge of that.
The more that, again, my father's generation is gone, survivors are gone, soon their children will be gone. And as it gets more attenuated, it'll be a story.
Right.
The people will historically challenge, which is what's happening, which is insane. But we're going down a bad path.
Generally speaking, I don't mind growing older. I don't like the back pain. I don't like the knee pain. And the other thing I don't like is the fact that nobody gets my references anymore. At least younger people don't, because they didn't live through this kind of stuff.
I do, Nancy.
Okay.
Don't worry.
Thank you, but I think it's that's a light way of saying what Joel's saying, which is that as history fades into the rearview mirror, we forget what happened, and yeah, it does seem insane that would be the case. But I've also seen some deliberately obscurant textbooks that are done in some of these like Christian schools or these classical schools that describe slavery as servants, and then some of these large farms had servants, and the servants were, and it's like, that's not the same thing. So sorry to step on you, Steve. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. I don't remember what I was going to say.
Okay.
Other than to tell you, when you say about references, that people don't understand your references.
Yeah.
I tell this to people all the time. If my wife kicked me out of the house and I had to go out and meet women, I would have one test before I would do more than just sit there and have one drink. And that test would be, do you know who David Ruffin was?
Ooh,
Because if you don't know who David Ruffin was, you ain't got no business.
We have nothing to talk about, right?
dang. That'll DQ most of the population. The other day, a student of mine asked a question in class, and I said something on the lines of, and they were apologetic. I said, it's a question a child would ask, but not a childlike question. Because I remember the commercial back when I was younger about a kid asking his grandpa, "Hey, Daddy, or Grandpa, what was Vietnam?" And then you hear this narrator come on, and they were just selling Time Life books on Vietnam. But the truth is that there's a lot of people that don't know about Vietnam and the kind of legacy that's set forward. So, Nancy, I think you got another clip, though.
I do have another clip, but I have to tell you, I'm not sure which one I played first. I think this is the other one, and I don't think there's a way to abort it if it's the same one. I have two Jon Stewart clips, and oh well, let's see.
No. As our spokesjew, and we hear you, the people out there, and we know, the power and control that the Jews have collectively, because that's how we wield it.
Sure. It's all unanimous decision.
Correct. I'm not on all the committees, and I don't know who ended Kanye's Adidas deal. That wasn't my committee. I'm on oil prices and bagel flavors. I do bagel flavors. By the way, and I say this to all you out there who enjoy bagels, Blueberry was a rogue committee. That was not us.
By the way, I was absolutely shocked to learn that most blueberry muffins don't use blueberries; they use grapes.
Not my blueberry muffins. I use actual blueberries in there.
Not mine either.
Yeah.
All right.
There you go.
But,
They cheated.
Okay. Well, as we say in so many different contexts, one is too much.
Yeah.
So, well, I think that's a fine enough segue to go ahead then and consider somebody else who traffics in the conspiratorial, and that is, of course, Donald J. Trump, who, on opening day of the firearm season here in Michigan for deer, decided to go ahead and declare his candidacy for 2024 with yet another run for office. I was asking some people about this, and they said we didn't even know that he announced it. There was really not anything close to the bombast or fanfare, it seems, as though him coming down the escalator at Trump Tower in 2015 was. Where are we going with this? And with a new logo or a new slogan of "Keep America Powerful Again," or "Make America Powerful Again."
As a Democrat, and I'm wary of saying this because this is what I said more or less the last time. I see it as good news for Democrats. I mean, nobody knows what the future holds, but by doing this, he, number one, has become the de facto front runner. He has put up a formidable wall against anyone other than, say, Ron DeSantis. I still think Ron DeSantis could beat him at the primary level, but I don't think Nikki Haley could. I don't think Ted Cruz. Oh my God, Ted Cruz. I don't think any of those people who have been teasing about running in 24 can do that. But I also see if he and DeSantis go head to head and really go head to head, I think it could be really good for Democrats, because say DeSantis wins the primaries and wins the nomination. What do you think Trump is going to do for the remainder of 2024, from say August or whenever the primary or the convention is until the election? He is going to shit talk.
Go to his court hearings. Maybe.
Obviously, he's So
that's just my off the top of my head take. It could be completely wrong. Anybody?
Yeah, well, the guy's a loser. I mean, he's losing. He's losing. Let him keep losing. My want for him is to have complete shame, bankruptcy, have his family, the property taken away. I want him. I think people are kicking him now as he's going down. The lower he sinks, the more vicious people are going to start kicking him. And I think that's what we're going to see with Donald. I think he's disintegrating. Is how I see it.
All right, Steve.
I'm melting.
Well, to me, I agree with really what both Nancy and Joel said. I think, as I've said 5,000 times on this show, you got to remember you're talking about a criminal mind. You're not talking about a regular person. And because he's a narcissistic criminal, I kind of think, Nancy, and asked in answer to your question, if he were to lose the nomination, I wouldn't be the least bit surprised to see him run as a third party, because he's not a Republican. He's not a Democrat. He's really nothing other than a narcissist.
Yep.
And if he can't stand to not have his point on his face out there in front of everybody, I could see him doing that. The thing that I really wonder, and it's going to, when we get to Schmuck of the Week, I'm going to give you my Schmuck. The reaction of the other Republicans. I don't know if you guys either saw or read Mike Pence's trying to tiptoe through the tulips there when he was. I mean, have you ever seen a more disgraceful performance? This is a man who claims to be a Christian. He goes to church all the time. He always refers to his wife as mother, and he cannot, for the life of him, make an honest response to a question.
No, he really can't.
It's maddening.
And I think that to me, the most interesting thing is watching people like him, and I can't wait for Lindsey Graham, the spineless guy that ever was, all these guys to be confronted, because the media people finally are waking up from their collective comas, and they're actually trying to talk to them and make them answer those questions. And when you're watching it, you're looking, and everybody can tell when someone is dissembling or they refuse to answer. And I just find that to be the most interesting part of this whole thing.
Actually, Fish, I think I can't think of another worse performance, and that I think was Tiny Tim doing Tiptoe Through the Tulips. But there's a reference for you, Nancy.
He really is he's a version of Dan Quayle. Just it's so funny that he and Dan Quayle are like this, because
Indianans.
Yeah,
it's the blues, the vacant blue eyes, the vacant expression, the decent head of hair, and absolutely nothing coming out of their mouth means anything at all. And it's just, I think it's kind of hilarious. It's I said on Facebook yesterday that when he washes out of the primaries after probably 2, he will the only people attending his speech will be middle-aged women who cry, because he would have made such a great president, and the same people who voted for Dan Quayle before he dropped out.
David, will this embolden Biden to run again? And if so, is that necessarily a good thing for the Dems?
That's a great question.
Very great.
A question a child would ask, but not a child question.
So I may,
by the way, I love that.
So with outing myself as your as one of your resident conservatives here, thinkers here, I'm playing on the Democratic side. So I'm hope he does, but I look at both the Democratic Party and the GOP, and I see some serious. But we already know the problems on the GOP side. Which is very, very obvious. But right now, I think there's going to be a messaging issue, and I think while we're all, facing a lot of pocketbook issues, I think nonetheless is that somehow or another, Democrats are going to have to raise their awareness of making us remind us in 2024 of all of the wonderful things that Biden has done thus far. The age has to somehow come off of the table, and I don't know how you do that because and anything is going to happen between now and then that may even expose that or not. But I'd like to see him give it another go at it because I believe that he's heading in the right direction. But this is a scary thing. We got 2 years to see what's going to happen, and I just don't know. I mean, I don't know if I don't know if he can hang in there, but I hope he can.
Especially if it's him against DeSantis, if it's age against youth, that's going to be another. The optics look awful. But I tell you, Biden has governed. It's been, we're not waking up every morning terrified of what tweets coming out. He's governed. He's got legislation through. The fact that the Democrats did so well, quite frankly, in this election.
Well, I think by next week, Joe, we're not going to have to worry about any tweets coming out from anybody. But that's
isn't that great?
Yeah, Steve.
Right. I think that the only way Biden should run would be if Trump gets their nomination, because then it'll be two old 80-year-old people and blah, blah, blah. I agree with Joel 100%, whether it's DeSantis or anybody else. I just think that the man is too old. The fact that Charles Grassley ran for the Senate again at age, 89?
Or 91.
The chutzpah of doing something like that. So I'm hopeful that we'll find somebody. I think there are a lot of younger Democrats, particularly some of the governors, and my favorite, of course, is Pete Buttigieg, but that's probably not going to happen.
An amazingly impressive candidate.
He's incredibly he's so sharp on his feet. I mean, he's such a quick thinker and good talker. I think though that the gay thing is going to hurt him, and I think the fact that he's just kind of a, who knows. I mean, I don't want to build up Ron DeSantis into some kind of insurmountable obstacle, because honestly, political junkies know who he is, Floridians know who he is, but the rest of the country in large part does not know who he is. And from what I've seen of him, he's not that impressive. He oversteps like a MAGA shithead every chance that he gets. The appeals court just overruled one of his either executive orders or a law that he bullied through, something about any college professor who teaches woke ideology, loses their
woke liberalism.
Yeah. And it was, the court just laughed in his face. And I mean, if that's the way he goes, if that's his MO, and that's the other thing is, like, for such a guy who's walking around like he's the biggest alpha in the world, he's modeled everything from the way he talks to, his physical performance on Donald Trump. He's sucking up to daddy, and and daddy's mad now. So I mean, who knows what's going to happen? Who knows who the real Ron DeSantis is?
But I think even he was smart enough to know that the appeals court. I mean, after all, he's Harvard Law. He was smart enough to know that that the appeals court would overturn it. I mean, except for the off chance that Clarence Thomas would grant it cert and have it go up the pipeline. But I mean, he certainly was playing to the base, and certainly we're going to see this happening with the House now in very slight and slim, but still majority Republican control, with the pledges of having hearings on Hunter Biden, on Joe Biden, on Joe Biden's probably granddaughter, and creating a set of Biden Benghazi show committee hearings. Clearly, these are not going to go anywhere. I guess what's the tipping point that enough Republicans for the primaries in 2024 say, you know what, it's enough, crazy town.
I think
the people who write the big checks have already said that. So
yeah, I think we're close to that. I think Trump fatigue is finally hit. I don't know if the fever's completely broke. It hasn't probably, but the fatigue has. So,
Well, it's
Well,
broken for one person, a nonagenarian by the name of Rupert Murdoch, who
yeah.
apparently seems to be pulling his support. I mean, imagine pulling support for Trump and Jerry Hall in the same year.
who would have thunk it? I like to refer to him as Florida Man on page 26.
Yeah.
Florida Man makes announcement. That was great.
Hey, I want to say is that let's not forget, in lead up to 2016 is that, at least when Jeb Bush another Florida governor got into the race, I thought that in fact that he had a great shot at it, and then that totally, the primary system and then the cannibalization that went on between the GOP candidates really shook that out. So I think it is good thought to think that not hold our breath on DeSantis, because I think there's still another shoe out there. I don't know what it is, but history has proven that anything can happen, and I think it will. Regarding Rupert Murdoch, this is not actually a surprise to me. This is not the first time that Rupert has sort of bailed on. I mean, he's played this around the world.
Right.
He was not a when then Prime Minister
Boris Johnson?
John Mayer, Sir John, when he became no longer useful to him as to sort of his going along to his thinking of where the UK should go in Europe, he bailed on him and went over to Tony Blair, who clearly won. So and he's done this in politics in Australia. So it's Murdoch is a very transactional kind of guy. I mean, and same as Trump. So the reality is that for him, it's just about money and it's about business, and that's how he's going to treat it. So at this point now, he's using all of his media assets to basically call Trump a loser so many different ways. His stories are, basically in the below the fold and in the narrative somewhere, small print. That's just business for him, and and he's done with Trump, no doubt.
Yeah, it wasn't that. I think the test was whether or not Hannity would ever, throw Trump overboard would be the real test as to whether or not Trump's, is no longer welcome. That's what I'm waiting for to see.
So what we're saying here is it's not the Jews who control the media, it's Rupert Murdoch.
Yes, which is an example of how Jews don't control the media.
The Australians control the media. So go figure.
Well, apparently, still contesting and still refusing to concede the projected loss in Arizona for the gubernatorial seat, Kari Lake made a trip over to Mar-a-Lago and got a standing ovation when she spoke at a luncheon for, and you're going to have to forgive the oxymoronic sound here, a think tank that Trump has set up. But it seems as though she alone was there, along with Madison Cawthorn, who apparently has closed his offices 2 months early, the South Carolina congressman who lost in the primaries. They were the main people who were there at Trump's declaration of candidacy on Monday, possibly vying for being the Veep on the ticket.
I'm really hoping for a Trump Marjorie Taylor Greene ticket there. That could really be
awesome. David, thank you for joining us. If you want to go ahead and just dial in your Schmuck of the Week right now, we can discuss it.
Elizabeth Holmes.
Okay,
right.
And she's being sentenced today, right? For
Yes.
What's your prediction of what's she going to get?
I think she's going to get. I really wanted to get the 15 years, but I think I think she's probably going to get let off the hook, and I think she shouldn't. I think she was reckless. She's using again privilege. I call her a Karen in a designer suit. I think she I think there'll be. I hope that she gets sentenced some time, but I believe that she really defrauded not only investors, but she defrauded folks who basically were relying on this Thanos, whatever a technology of being able to test one drop of blood, and I think that she did harm, to people who were counting on that. And so I hope she gets the book, but I don't think she will.
Okay.
I'm thinking 5 to 8, and she has to watch 4 hours of Home Shopping Network every day.
That's hell. No,
Right.
That's right, Joel. That's not prison. That's just flat out hell.
Yeah,
All right.
David, don't make me do that.
I appreciate
David,
it.
thank you so much for
All right,
joining us.
man.
Great, thanks. Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
You do. Thank you.
David's got to go to physical therapy.
How many people do you think are gonna stay on the Trump crazy train? Do you think?
Personally, I think that's the question for that's going to be a part again of my Schmuck of the week. I think that most of those people, McCarthy and a lot of them, they don't have any spine. They don't have any cojones. But the question is going to be, and we've kind of noticed this over the last couple of weeks, when they start to think he's a loser and start to think that other people think he's a loser, since all they care about is their self, they now say, well, it's in my interest to get off the train. I don't think anybody all of a sudden woke up one morning and said, that motherfucker, I never should have supported him in the first place. They're just looking at him as a loser. And as we all know, most of these people who get involved in politics, not a lot of our candidates, but a lot of these folk that get involved in politics, they're there for power and their own power and preserving their own position. So I believe that the further it goes, where they start to think he doesn't have that power anymore, I think more of them will abandon him. I have a different question, though. I know we've been kibitzing about Marjorie Taylor Greene, whatever. Who do you guys actually think, if he got the nomination, who do you think he would drag along? Were you serious, Marjorie Taylor Greene? Or do you think that there's someone...
I think she'd be on the short list. I think he has to have a woman. He'll pick a woman. Maybe he'll pick somebody like Nikki Haley. Who knows? What do you think?
I don't know if he'll pick. I'm thinking Kristi Noem, South Dakota governor.
Oh God, her. Yeah, she's real good looking too. He always likes really pretty women around.
What's telephonic? He said, it's all optics, right?
Yeah.
It's a production. It's a TV show.
Right.
That's pretty much what their party has turned into right here in Michigan. The qualification for running for governor or running for senator. Let's not even talk about Herschel just because he was a great running back. But the qualification seems to be Carrie Lake is one, Tudor Dixon is one. If you've been on TV, you see, and people have seen your face on TV, and everybody thinks you're kind of cute on TV, and you aren't really good at reading the teleprompter on TV, that makes you a good governor. Wait, why would you possibly want any experience in government?
Yeah.
You just come from TV and go to governor.
I've made
attractive.
a version of that speech on this show many times, almost as often as he's a criminal speech, which is just, this is a job. It's a job with job requirements. It's not just about, waving and looking pretty and wearing the right color of dress. But, even look at Gretchen Whitmer, who at least was qualified. She'd been, in the legislature and was a lawyer. And even she has really stepped up her TV game since she took office, 4 years ago. She's lost a little weight. She's had some extremely good work done on her face, and she's dressing really sharp. She looks wonderful. And I think that's, the one thing when I looked at the last debate that the two of them had, my takeaway was they both look sensational.
Did you say, Nancy, she's had work on her face? How would you possibly know that?
You can tell.
Unbelievable.
Well, you're a guy. This is the kind of thing women my age talk about.
Her. I was 10 feet from her. I did. She looked the same to me as she looked when I had lunch with her.
Well, she didn't. Like I said, she didn't have. It's like you don't have good plastic surgery is defined by people looking at your face and saying, "You look great." And I can't quite put my finger on it. She's at the very least she's had Botox because she has the shiny head. I don't think this is wrong. If men are going to judge women by how they look, I never think it's a bad idea for a woman to do something about how they look. And that's, but she's also seen a stylist, and she's she's dressing much better. Remember her first State of the Union and they were all sneering because she had, her dress was, pulling across her boobs, and they were like, get a dress that fits. She got some fucking dresses that fit. They look fantastic. And she's wearing, leather all the time. That was during COVID. She looked, She
I
was
thought you were
like,
going to say. I thought you were going to tell us that they're real and they're spectacular.
Oh my God.
I'm sure they are. She said something about it. She said, I've been teased about my curves my whole life. And as somebody who ditto, I understood that entirely. So go ahead.
I don't judge her on her aesthetics. I judge her on the fact that she gets to fly down to Florida in the middle of COVID on a private jet when I fly coach. The horror
The
of it all.
horror, right? Exactly.
Okay, Nancy. I think we're at that time. Do you have the ability to cue it?
We are at that time already. Okay. Well, hold on one second. Let me find. Okay. How about this one?
You're a schmuck. And I'm thunderstruck by your arrogance and your idiocy. It really is no mystery. It's true, and you know it. You're a schmuck.
Well, that's a little long, but I think it's okay.
The plangent sounds of an Ovation acoustic electric
I haven't
guitar.
heard the Ovation in a bit. The guitar. That was my first guitar. Was an Ovation guitar when I was 16.
You play guitar?
I'm terrible,
Really?
but I've been playing forever. But I've never gotten better.
Okay. Okay.
I just saw on Facebook Marketplace, Joel, some guy's selling an Ovation 12-string for only $250.
That's incredible.
I'm like, what's wrong with this guitar?
Yeah.
But
those are really highly sought after when I was like 17 and 18. They were new. They had that rounded back. It was like, whoa, that's
I've got one, man. I love it. Love the sound. Okay, who's got a schmuck?
I have one.
Go ahead.
So it's consistent with the conversation we've been having today. My schmuck is Matt Gaetz, but it's not for the usual reason that he's an asshole and an idiot. It's not a child molester. It's not for that reason. Matt Gaetz typifies just what we were talking about. Trump has this gathering, right, where he can't get anybody to come other than Madison Cawthorn and a couple other people. And Gaetz doesn't show up. But what does he do? He doesn't even have the balls to say, I'm not coming because I'm sick of you, or I'm not coming because you're dragging down the party. No, Matt Gaetz says, I'm not, because the weather was terrible and I couldn't get a plane flight. Unfortunately, some weather person went on. The weather was fine. People were flying all over Florida. They were everywhere in Florida on planes. But Matt Gaetz, the ballless wonder that he is still afraid of a 78-year-old man who couldn't fight his way out of a paper bag. And he said, it's not because I think Trump's an asshole. It's not because his time has passed. It's because of the goddamn weather. I could not get a flight. Matt Gaetz, unbelievable that you're not getting it for your normal behavior, but you get it for that as far as I'm concerned. He's my schmuck.
There we go.
I would have actually had a modicum of respect for him if he would have said, you know what, I'm out of hair product and I don't think it would survive. So, stepping out.
And I have a play date at the roller rink. So,
I mean, if he really wanted to be there, he could have driven. It's not like he's in California. He's in the Panhandle, right? That's his district. But
the weather was bad. You can't drive in bad weather either.
Oh yeah, it's terrible. Yeah. So.
Well, okay. Florida. I mean, who drives in Florida rain, right? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Who's next?
I'll go.
Go
Mine is not going to be, subtle. I mean, I think Trump is a schmuck of the week based on his announcement and just the continued proliferation of bullshit, lies, and spouting hatred and crap. When will we be rid of this man? God only knows. But it is so distressing to hear him and to see him. Viscerally, I get insane. So he is my schmuck of the week. I just can't stand that man, and I hate the fact that he's pushing this even further, and God knows where it may land. But my hope is that the wizard is behind the curtain has come out. We see he's a little naked, puny man, and he will be treated as such. That is my want.
Good for you. Mm-hmm. All right. Okay.
Nancy.
I was going to go with Carrie Lake, but I've decided that I'm going to go with Michon Maddock, who was one of the other dweebs who showed up down at Mar-a-Lago for the big announcement and was even giving quotes to reporters afterward about how happy she was he was running again. This woman just augured in as badly for the Republican Party, which she co-leads in Michigan, worse than any party leader in my memory and probably in my lifetime. They lost the big three. They lost the two chambers of the state legislature, and in large part because the party leadership and the candidates that they promoted are MAGA dipshits. And she just went down and said, essentially, MAGA dipshits rule forever. So there you go. So she'd be Michonne Maddock would be mine.
Well, they went down and they lost a seat in Western Michigan when John Gibbs lost.
Well, they lost. Yeah, I mean, they lost a lot. I mean, in fact, I think the day after the election, she was crowing, "Oh, we had some very good school board races." It's like, oh, school board. That's not even your job.
That's where it all starts. Wait a minute.
Right, exactly. So anyway.
So you're saying we've got a chance.
Yeah.
Okay.
How about you?
Okay. So, I mean, there are so many. I mean, Sam Bankman-Fried and FTX and that just whole dumpster fire. So I'm going to give a schmuck, and then I'm going to give a bigger schmuck, a mumser. The schmuck of the week. The schmuck of the week is Adnan Oktar, also known as Harun Yahya, a Turkish televangelist / cult sex leader, who apparently the law finally caught up with him on charges of, leading a criminal enterprise, sexual abuse of countless people, including minors. He got sentenced. You know, David was wondering how much Elizabeth Holmes is going to get. Anyone want to take a guess? 8,658 years.
God.
Is there parole? Is there parole?
Yeah.
Parole.
I invite myself to the program.
Only 4,000, right?
I knock it down to 6,200.
I think you have to serve half your sentence to get eligible for parole.
Well, on my way. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. We can do that.
So that I was like, that's beautiful. But my true mumser schmuck of the week is Ticketmaster.
Right.
As some of you may know, Taylor Swift is going back on tour with her newly released and highly acclaimed album, Midnight. And she is coming to Detroit for not one, but 2 dates next year. I think June 9th and June 10th at Ford Field. And by the way, I may be saying this just so that someone will hear me and think, wow, he gave an endorsement and I get some tickets as a comp for it. So the way that Ticketmaster operates is now because of course they have merged with Live Nation. And for the life of me, when Mitch Albom was talking about this on his show, he made it a point of saying that merger was allowed during the Obama administration, which the fact that he politicized it just sort of makes him another schmuck.
He's my schmuck of the year, but go ahead.
The perennial schmuck.
Perennial, right.
So with Live Nation, they have control of 85% of the ticket and concert venue markets. And what they have done now, ostensibly to prevent bots from taking seats and then going off market or aftermarket and selling them, they had a pre-sale for true Taylor fans, where you had to, of course, prove your loyalty to Taylor Swift, probably give an oath of allegiance with some blood involved, and then you got a code. Well, apparently that code only simply put you into a digital line, so you weren't going to have to camp out like we used to in the old days. And when the pre-sale occurred, the system crashed. And some people waiting 4 hours, 5 hours, they weren't able to get in and get their tickets. The lucky few who did now are considered to be holy, but
so
in preparation for then the opening of this to the general public and the rest of the rabble, Ticketmaster yesterday announced that due to very high volume and a paucity of inventory, we're not having a general sale of tickets. So they maxed out.
So everything went to the pre-sale?
Everything went to the pre-sale. And oh yes, by the way, Ticketmaster and Live Nation also control the aftermarket, where you could go and try to resell the tickets over there. So there are quite a few Swifties who are upset about this. And the very fact that Ticketmaster does this for concert after concert, you may not care about Taylor Swift, but you might care about Springsteen, or you might care sooner or later it's coming to an artist you really love.
All right.
So my schmuck of the week is Ticketmaster. The last show that I went. Oh, by the way, so right now there are tickets going on sale on Ticketmaster, sort of aftermarket. I kid you not, $94,870 for a ticket to a Taylor Swift concert.
Well, wait a minute. It is Taylor Swift. And how
it is
where do I
Taylor
see?
Swift.
Am I front row 15?
The last show I saw was at the Magic Bag in Ferndale, and it was an old '90s shoegazer band called House of Love, and I paid $30 at the door.
And that was outrage.
Outrage, I'm telling you. So
all right, let's wrap
your
this
schmuck
thing.
of the week. Anyways, thank you for go ahead.
Steve,
One other thing before we go, you mentioned the Turkish guy that got 8,740 years or whatever it was. That brings to mind one of Richard Pryor's greatest and funniest commentaries when he and Gene Wilder went to film Stir Crazy, and he met a couple guys in there that were doing double life, and he's talking to the audience. He goes, "Double life. Can you imagine? If you die and come back, you got to go right to the penitentiary. No, sir, you don't go to kindergarten. Back to the penitentiary." That guy is doing more than double life. So he's going to, even if he comes back, he's going to penitentiary.
all right.
Okay, Fish, this is going to be a really unfair question, but I'm going to go ahead and go around the horn. Stir Crazy, See No Evil, Hear No Evil, Silver Streak. What's the best Pryor Wilder combo movie?
I love Silver Streak. I remember watching in the theater.
I think the only one I saw, I wasn't a big movie guy. I think it was Stir Crazy, so I have to vote with that.
Gene Wilder was brilliant. I love Gene Wilder. Candyman is still.
That was too sad when his wife. That was just too sad. When his wife died.
Just so lovable.
Stir Crazy was one of those movies that I was maybe 12 years old, and I snuck into the Pix in Lapeer for $1.50, even though it was an R-rated movie, because the old man who ran the place never carded. So can't even remember what his name is, but Mr. Pix, thank you for introducing me to one of the comedy classics. Oh, and Porky's. So anyway, Steve Fishman, thank you. Joel Sklar, thank you. Nancy Derringer, you know what? In lieu of Allan, you get to use his line.
Drive home safely.
There we go. Thanks, everybody. By the way, have a great and happy Thanksgiving. So take care.